Malkah, we agree that, I agree with you that it's great that we have a Jewish state, a place where we could self-determine, where we could be safe. Perhaps the reasons are quite different. Ariel's main concerns, and these are my concerns as well, is that it poses a human rights issue. That in order for us to be secure and free, that comes at the expense of the Palestinians. Do you see a way in which we can have our national aspirations in a way that Palestinians can also have equal rights or their national aspirations?
That's a great question, and I think that that is one of the biggest questions that people. Do you hear me? I'm sorry, am I muted?
Yeah, okay. No, we hear you.
I think that's one of the biggest questions that people are asking today, and there's a lot of guilt that some people feel about the idea that there's going to be a Jewish state, and yet there are these other people, and they don't have a state. I'm here to try and help assuage that guilt for a number of reasons. First of all, there's a lot of history that goes with who was in this region and when. We could go, there are whole semesters and universities that are dedicated and giant books that are dedicated. But very, very briefly, for around 1917, Arabs started a big influx into Israel. There were, of course, Arabs here in the region. I'm not here to suggest that there weren't. But there was a major influx of Arabs into this region from Egypt, from Syria, from Jordan. They came they started to come under the Turks and then under the British mandate to fill for jobs and things that the British needed. The war happened in 1948. In which Israel declared its independence. There were big questions about did Israel forcibly expel people. According to reports by the British, some 70% of Arabs left on their own because they had received information or encouragement, I guess, from Arab countries that were planning to destroy the Jewish state or the newfound Jewish state. That they should leave so that they can cleanse the area of Jews, and then they'll come back and they'll be able to live wherever, and they'll be able to take the spoils of the war. Happens to be that they weren't able to fulfill that promise to those people, and so those people, some of them did end up being allowed to return, and some of them didn't. A lot of them went to Jordan. Then Jordan basically, some time went by, and Jordan. The 1967 Six-Day War happened. In the midst of all that, Jordan occupied what Ariel would call the West Bank. I would call Judea and Samaria. And these people, basically we had the Six-Day War. Israel liberated the lands in 1967. The people who were in the lands at the time were Jordanians. And then after the Six-Day War, Israel, being such a young country, was kind of, I think, in shock from itself, didn't know what to do with the local populations, dealt with still the rage of local Arab countries, dealt with the rage and shock of the international community, who suddenly saw that the Jewish state went from being a bunch of Holocaust survivors who needed blankets thrown around their shoulders to an incredible, miraculous army. And a population was formed of people who were left in the middle of all this. And one place in which I think that Ariel and I can find common ground is that Israel made some profound mistakes. From that point, and Israel continues to make profound mistakes. I would never suggest to you that Israel has done everything right up until this point. And I think that Israel has contributed to the problem of what Ariel will call a refugee problem, but I will call more of a stateless problem. And the biggest thing that we did wrong was to suggest to the Jordanians that they could stay, and that possibly there would be some kind of rights given for a state. In the 1980s, all these people who Ariel calls Palestinians were in fact Jordanians. They had Jordanian citizenship up until the 1980s, when King Abdullah started to withdraw their citizenship, basically taking it away, making them stateless. And so basically Jordan, it was sort of as if Jordan gave birth to a baby, left it on our doorstep, and then took off. And Israel was left with this big population. And because Jews are a good people and a merciful people, we don't just expunge people from the land. And as we can see here from our discussion, the impulses of Jews toward humanitarianism can take many different forms. My humanitarian effort toward the Palestinian people who call themselves Palestinian people today would be to liberate them from their horrible oppressive authority, the Palestinian Authority. And I know Ariel also agrees with me that the Palestinian Authority is a corrupt and a really, I'll teach you all a Hebrew word, dafuk, okay? It's a really messed up entity. Yeah. I would try to liberate them from that situation, and I would force Jordan to give them back their Jordanian citizenship. I mean, what they did, taking away the nationality of like so many people, is completely immoral. It's unjust. And what's sickest about it is it's the manipulation of a massive body of people, many of whom would like to live just a regular life like I live my regular life. And it's a manipulation of those people for the very cynical cause of just trying to destroy the teensy-weensy little ethnic protectorate that we have here in this region. And so do I think that we can that we can find a humanitarian solution for these people? Yes. Do I think it's important? Of course it's important. Do I think it's Israel's job and we should be beating our chest because we've been abusing people for 70 years? No, I don't think that.
Thank you, Malkah.